You get into some very pragmatic ways that these health systems have gotten in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to march through the 5 shifts,
Okay.
probably read a little excerpt from your material, and then just jump into some questions. So
Great.
the first shift, from tactical fixes to an experience strategy. And I'll just do it in your words. So while healthcare organizations often start enhancing consumer experiences in one-off initiatives, and that is so true, they should move towards optimizing entire healthcare journey as a strategic priority. Doing so requires establishing a vision for the organization, hiring the right leaders to take charge, and creating an experiential plan to change and win with the consumers. So give us there's an awful lot there. Give us an idea of what this first shift looks like, from tactical to a holistic experience strategy.
Yeah, so I can't help but thinking in threes. So let me give you 3 thoughts in your in your question. I am a management consultant after all. The first one is CX, and you reference it, is going from a to-do item to something the business organizes around, right? So if the idea that the definition of customer experience or patient experience is let's have friendly people that greet people as they enter the hospital and help them find their way, that's a good thing to have on a to-do item. But that doesn't fundamentally change the experience, right? I'd say the same thing about initiatives to reduce night noise in the med surg unit, or an initiative to reduce wait time when people call the call center with a billing question. All those are good things to do, but in and of themselves do not galvanize transformation. When it becomes truly around like not something on the to-do list, but the overall strategy for it. Let's just take health systems as the most present example. Is it becomes the organizing idea for everything we're trying to do. So one of the stories we can talk more about, Piedmont Healthcare and how they did that. That's kind of point one, though, going from a to-do item to something the business organizes around. The second thing, and this is related, is going from a touch point orientation to a relationship orientation. When I measure HCAHPS, that speaks to a single night stay in the hospital and did I have a good experience? Now that's more than one touch point, that's several touch points, but versus an NPS type of measure of what's the relationship a health system has with people in our communities, that's a very different way of thinking about, just as from a metric standpoint, how to think about patient experience holistically and a patient experience strategy holistically. And it takes you to doing different things. And then the third idea is what I call going from fixing what's broken to a brand experience, right? Fixing what broken mentality is, where are we pissing people off and how do we stop pissing them off? And again, that's a good thing, versus saying, what's the unique way that our organization, want to live and be perceived in the marketplace and be different? And let's synchronize what we're telling people, what we're telling them about why they should come here, versus what we're actually delivering. And let's make the promise that we make through our marketing communications match the promise that we deliver, right? And make sure it's unique and differentiating and relevant. So those are the 3 ways that we think about making this shift from tactical to more holistic.
That's really interesting. I like the distinction between fixing the problems and touch points, because in conversations we talk an awful lot about touch points. Here's where people experience us, but they experience us more. If you're going to change the culture, it's more than just about fixing all these little things. I mean, you can fix up all the things that are wrong with the house, but still the foundation's broken.
Yeah.
And you just don't galvanize or mobilize the organization to change the way they act. And I guess that's what you're after here, is really changing the entire healthcare system to be thinking about experience holistically versus just fixing the things that are broken. Does that capture it?
Yeah. No, exactly right. And to your point, one of the things we write about is this need to jumpstart change, right? To in order to galvanize, and there's a few examples we use. I mean, for me, the most classic, and it's now a few years old, but what Geisinger did a few years ago with their proven experience money back guarantee, right? And what we hear from our interviews with some of the leaders there is that when Dr. Feinberg first put this out there was a lot of grumbling about the new guy, and is this crazy, and how are we really going to do this, and how would this work? But in a few years only 500,000, I put air quotes, only 500,000 in payments made in refunds, Well, $500,000 could have easily been justified by the quality of the PR they got. That publicity alone would have made it a good investment. But far more important than the PR was how it changed, because all of a sudden they could track service line by service line, location by location, who's giving refunds. And it signaled as much internally that they were serious about this and serious about, putting the consumer at the center and really being consumer centric and winning with them. And that, that tactical program, that experience strategy became a galvanizing force for change.
Yeah. Are there other health systems? I mean, you share a lot of stories.
Yeah.
Intermountain, Novant, Piedmont, others, but are there other stories around that, around this movement?
Yeah, I think that those are my favorites and my go-tos. But almost every client we've worked with, transformational change, usually starts with. It sometimes starts bottoms up, sometimes it starts tops down. But even when it starts top down with a vision, it's got to have a series of quick wins and small moves to start to prove it's not flavor of the month. We've seen it with a pharma client recently has done it. We've seen it with payers as well. It's really a pretty consistent pattern. The question is, in any company, there's always a million initiatives going on. How do you create something so compelling that it actually starts to get people to act and think differently? And that's why I go to that example.
Yeah, at our health system, we actually, we did the journey mapping around around orthopedics, and then we identified. And I think you had some of this in the articles, Know Me, Care for Me, Ease My Way. And to be honest with you, we had two others. I don't even remember what they are now. But but essentially what it was an attempt to get the organization to start thinking about, how do we get to know the patient more? How do we make sure that we're not asking the same question over and over again? How do we do our core competency and do it well in terms of caring for them? But then how do we do it at a price point that is palatable, to give them a bill that is understandable? And the Ease My Way thing is where we end up spending a lot of time, because there's an awful lot of friction within healthcare. And that was really our starting point. Would you recommend a different starting point, or where would we start?
It's a good question. So I think it depends on who's driving the transformation, right? When it's CEO led, it very often starts with this shift one, right? Setting this vision for what does consumer centricity look like for us, and how does it fit with our overall business strategy? And then it cascades to some more tactical fixes. And we'll talk about the shifts later, 3 and 5, if it's marketing, led by a marketing function or an experience function, it can start with, a new base of insights and understanding of consumers. It can start with a approach to innovation. It can start in different places. When it starts more grassroots, and for grassroots leaders that aren't leading big functions and aren't necessarily tangentially part of this, part of the C-suite or close to the C-suite, it almost always starts with some of these smaller types of pieces. And sometimes it starts with, stop pissing them off, I didn't mean to dismiss that at all, but it starts with some of those things around just, getting to know folks a little bit better and start to make sure that everyone else around you knows more about what they're dealing with.